The IKEA Business Network is now open for small businesses and entrepreneurs. Join for free today to get access to interior design services to help you make the most of your workspace, employee well-being benefits to help you and your people grow, and amazing discounts on travel, insurance, and IKEA purchases, deliveries, and more. Take your small business to the next level when you sign up for the IKEA Business Network for free today by searching IKEA Business Network.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. I am your host, Stephen Moore, economist. Happy to have you on one of the last weeks of summer. Although a lot of the kids are already in school. Others start on Monday, so it is always sad to see the end of the leisurely summer months, but I hope everyone has been enjoying this beautiful weather across the East Coast, and I hope you've had a wonderful summer, and I hope you're having a great weekend. We've got a very busy schedule for the show today. By the way, we are on for 2 hours now. This is the More Money Show on WABC, and we used to be on from 1 to 2, but now we're on from 1 to 3, so we can have more great guests and more discussions about how you can make more money, and how we like to talk about economics. We like to talk about politics. We like to talk about finance. And so I've got some great guests coming up. But I want to start the show to talk about the pressing issue of the day, which, of course, is what Kamala Harris is proposing for her economic agenda if she is elected. Now, by the way, I don't really believe that Kamala Harris will be the next president of the United States. I really don't. I don't care what the polls show. I don't care what the pundits say. I just would be shocked and so disappointed if the American people elected someone as far to the left as Kamala Harris is. And I don't know Kamala Harris personally. I meet a lot of these politicians. I know most of them. I've never met Kamala Harris. So I can't comment about her, what she's like in person and that kind of thing. But I do follow her votes and her career and her agenda. And it frightens me, frankly. This is a woman who, along with her colleague, Tim Walz, who is her running mate, know absolutely nothing about business, know nothing about making a payroll, know nothing about how to employ people, how to actually make a business operate. And that kind of scares me, frankly, because her policies show that she has no concept of what it requires to make a business work. And look, we are a free enterprise country. We believe in the free market system. I think, at least I hope we do. I know most of my listeners do. And so this is under assault. The free enterprise system, ladies and gentlemen, is an assault. And this is not, I'm not trying to be vitriolic here. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I'm just saying that if you look at what this woman is talking about in terms of her agenda for America, it scares me. And it should scare you. And folks, I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent. I don't care if you're liberal, conservative, progressive, whatever. We all want a strong and prosperous country. We want a country where businesses can succeed, workers can make more money. America retains its status as the global economic superpower, where the dollar remains the global currency. All of those things, I believe, would be in great, great jeopardy if Kamala Harris came in and if she were to do the things that she is talking about. So last week on this show, we had a good discussion about price controls. And I think for those of you who are listening, you know, and I think, look, 90% of Americans know that price controls are a really dumb idea. And the other 10% were at the Democratic National Committee convention. But price controls simply interfere with the pricing system and the law of supply and demand, and they cause shortages. And I like to tell the story that when I grew up in Chicago, and I lived through price controls on everything from gasoline to groceries and things of that nature. I remember having to wait in line for a half an hour, sometimes 40 minutes, to get a fill up of gasoline because they put a price control on. And what that causes is shortages. So people had to wait and wait and wait, excuse me, until they could get their gas. And I remember thinking at that time, I was probably 12 or 13 years old, probably a freshman in high school, maybe eighth grade. I was thinking, what the hell is wrong with our country that you have to wait in line to get gasoline? You have to wait in line to get groceries. And that was a result of price controls. And price controls were a complete failure. But I was on CNBC earlier this week, and the woman I was on was some kind of left-wing professor. And we talked about price controls. And she said, by the way, this is a woman who had actually worked for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. And she said, we need to have grocery police. And what the grocery police are going to do is they're going to walk down the aisles of the grocery stores and the 7-Elevens and the Quick Marts and decide whether the prices are too high or too low. And I'm thinking, really? The government is going to tell a small store owner what they can charge for a candy bar or a bag of M&Ms or a dozen eggs? That just doesn't work. That's not America. So she comes out with that solution to deal with inflation when we all know why we have inflation. And if anybody doesn't know why we have inflation, then you have to go back to Economics 100. We have raging inflation because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris came in and spent and borrowed and printed $5 trillion. End of case. End of argument. That's why we have inflation. So how do you solve the inflation? You stop spending money we don't have. This is not complicated, folks. This is not, you don't need a PhD in economics or physics to understand what I'm talking about. And I think most Americans know exactly what I'm talking about, even if they have a junior high education. So why is it that Kamala Harris doesn't understand that the pricing system and the profit motive are probably the greatest inventions ever made in the history of mankind? You see, Kamala Harris thinks companies are making too much money. Now, she's never made a profit in her life, so she has no idea how to make a profit. And I've started businesses. I've started 4 businesses in my life. 2 of them were modest successes and 2 of them failed. Most businesses fail. And I'm not disparaging anyone who started a business and failed. It's not easy. It is not easy to start a business and to meet your costs and to provide the service or the product that your customers want. And the only way you're going to make a product that is profitable is if you make something someone wants. This is the beauty. This is the magic of the free enterprise system. You see, if you and I agree on a trade, you're going to give me your money if I give you a widget. The only way that transaction can happen in a free market economy is if you're better off by buying the widget and I'm better off by you giving me money for the widget. I mean, this is the wonderful thing about the free enterprise system. There's no coercion here. Nobody puts a gun to your head and when you go down to the grocery store and tells you what you have to pay for a dozen eggs. If it's too expensive, don't buy them. Go to the store next door and you might be able to find it for cheaper. So what the government's trying to do is saying, no, we're going to be the one that decides what you charge things. So I find that outrageous. Second of all, Kamala Harris this week announced her tax plan. And we're going to talk a lot about this over the next course of this show. But this tax plan is so frightening. She's talking about doubling the capital gains tax from 24% to 45%. She's talking about taxing unrealized capital gains, which is really just a national federal property tax because they're taxing you on what you own and they're taxing you on the appreciation of the asset, even if you didn't sell it. So if you're a farmer, and let's say the value of your farm went up by $500,000 over the last 20 years, you'd have to pay a $100,000 tax. But you still own the farm. You didn't sell it. Where are you going to get the money to do it? People would literally have to sell the farm to pay the tax. She wants to raise our corporate income tax. Now, what is that going to do? That's going to lead companies to leave the United States and go to other places like Ireland, where the corporate tax is about 1/3 as high as the rate that Kamala Harris wants. She wants to increase the death tax, which I think is the most outrageous, unfair tax ever invented. For someone like my father or people who are successful in business who spend their whole life building up their business and spend their whole life paying taxes, they pay payroll taxes, they pay income taxes, they pay state taxes, they pay sales taxes, they pay grocery taxes, they pay gas taxes, they pay taxes their whole life to build up their business. And then when they die, they have to turn over 30, 40, 50, 60% of their business to the government. And they can't leave it to their kids and grandkids. I'm sorry, that's confiscation. That is socialism. By the way, one of the 10 tenets of Das Kapital, which is the Karl Marx, is to tax inheritances. So this is right out of the Socialist Manifesto to increase these property taxes. I tell you, if you add up all of these taxes she is talking about, to make let's say $1 million investment in a business, if that business fails, you lose your $1 million. If you succeed, the government's going to take somewhere between 60 and 80% of your profits. So you're going to invest in a small business? Are you going to take that chance where you could either lose 100% of your money or whatever you gain, the government's going to take 50, 60, 70, 80% of it away from you? This is going to kill capital investment. Small businesses need investors to get off the ground. Sometimes it's a family member, sometimes it's a friend, sometimes it's if you're a bigger company, a private equity firm, they're putting their money at risk. And the government's saying, if that risk pays off, you're going to have to pay 60 or 70 or 80% of your reward to the government. What is that going to do? It's going to mean that you're not going to find people to invest. Who would invest under those circumstances? You want a return on your investment. And what Kamala Harris is saying is she's going to reduce the return on your investment. Now, if you do that, you're going to get less investment. There's an old saying. It's a very simple saying from my buddy Arthur Laffer. If you tax something, you get less of it. If you tax our businesses, you'll get less businesses. If you tax profits, you're going to get less profits. If you tax people's wages, you're going to get less hiring. These are just simple concepts. And if you don't let me make this really simple for folks, because I know that there may be some people who love Kamala Harris and don't quite understand this. She says profits are too high for businesses and they're greedy. Companies are greedy. And so she says she's going to cut into those profits by imposing these special taxes. Well, guess what? If you do that and the company can't make a profit, then the company doesn't exist. In other words, a company only exists to make a profit. It can't make a profit. Why would you have the business in the first place? So if you don't have the profits, you don't have the company. If you don't have the company, you don't have workers. Businesses are hired by businessmen and women who take these chances. And I'm sorry, I'm sick and tired of people treating the heroes of our economy, which are small businessmen and women, and we have about 25 million of them. Many of those of you listening to this show are the heroes of our economy. You employ people. You do more for the welfare of people than any other welfare program that's ever been existed and invented by government. So they're going to destroy our business sector if they do this. Nobody's going to invest in business. Nobody's going to want to start a business. People aren't going to have jobs to work at businesses. Wake up, America. Wake up. This is what Kamala Harris is talking about. The biggest $5 trillion tax increase in American history, all aimed at employers, at businesses, and, quote, rich people. And what's the old saying? I was never hired by a poor person. The people who do the hiring in this country tend to be the successful people, and I'm tired of us treating success as if it's some kind of a vice. No, success is a virtue, and we all want to be successful. You know what I'm talking about here, folks? I'm talking about the American dream. The American dream is to build a business, make it great, make a lot of money. Maybe you can become the next Warren Buffett. Maybe you can become the next Fed Smith who started FedEx. Maybe you can be the next Bill Gates. Maybe you can be the next Elon Musk. But everybody's got a shot at it, right? Everybody's got a shot at it in this land of opportunity. And if your ship comes in and you make it, do you really want the government to take it all away from you? Because that's what Kamala Harris is talking about. It is a frightening picture. Wake up, folks. Don't look at this in terms of personality. I know people, I don't like Donald Trump. I don't like what he says. I don't like the name calling. I don't like his antic. I don't like what happened on January 6th. I get it. And many times I agree with you. But if you care about our country, if you care about your job, if you care about the kitchen tables of having an income so you can buy the things that you want for you and your family, this is about as clear-cut a choice as you can get. Trump will make America richer like he did in his 4 terms, and Kamala Harris will make America poorer like Joe Biden has done in his 4 years. I mean, it's really that simple. Before I take this break, I want to mention one other quick thing. Please go to, if you want more information about what I'm talking about, please go to unleashprosperitynow.com, unleashprosperitynow.com, and you can pull down what we call our chart book on 25 of the major statistics comparing the job that Trump did on the economy and the job that Biden and Harris did on the economy. On virtually every one of these, Trump trumps Kamala Harris and Biden, and almost every one of them, and in many cases by a landslide. So if you're going to vote your pocketbook, I think you know who you need to vote for. I'm Steve Moore. This is the More Money Show, folks, and we will be right back. Thanks for listening this afternoon.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. I hope everyone is having a wonderful weekend on this wonderful Saturday afternoon. My first guest this afternoon is a good friend and a colleague, Carl Szabo, who is one of the chief officers of a group that I absolutely love. It's called NetChoice. And NetChoice basically stands for liberty and making sure that we have we are number one in the technology industries that matter, whether it's internet, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it is the social networks. We need to be number one. And NetChoice is in business to make sure that our supremacy in high tech is preserved. And Carl, is that working? Are we number one?
Number one is as fleeting as tomorrow. And that's kind of what we're seeing across the board. I mean, if you just look at the Olympics, right, you can be in first place and then suddenly somebody just blazes right by you
right.
at the last second. Right. And that's exactly what we're looking at right now with respect to our technological leadership across the world. Remember, we are the nation that invented the automobile, the television, the light bulb, the internet. Al Gore. And we are the world leader when it comes to technology. But that is not guaranteed. If you look at the history of the world, everything has ebbs and flows. And unfortunately, right now, we are definitely on a downward trend competitively. And that's because of government intervention, government involvement, and government intrusion.
So you and I have worked together on these issues over the last 5 years or so, and love working with the folks at NetChoice. And I want to just give you my quick take on this and then get your reaction to it. We are number one because we have the most innovative companies and we have the most innovative workers. And we have a lot of great, smart immigrants who come to the country and have made Silicon Valley and our technology corridors so predominant. But on the other hand, everybody in Washington now wants to regulate them. And even some of my friends, Carl, on the right, who are more normally kind of laissez-faire, free market, they want to regulate these companies, and they want to regulate Google, and they want to regulate Apple, and they want to regulate Facebook. And by the way, I'll bet a lot of our audience doesn't like Facebook, for example, because they do discriminate against conservatives. But on the other hand, they provide amazing products for the American people. They make a lot of money for the American people. They make a lot of money for our government in terms of the taxes they pay. And so I get frustrated that, though, some of our friends on the right say, oh, we have to regulate the tech companies. And what do you say to them?
Regulation is great until the other person's in power. And let's be clear. we have watched under the current Biden administration the, quote, regulation of tech in favor of Democrats. Let's remember,
That's right.
Not too long ago that during COVID, and this came out in the Twitter files, there were lawsuits by Robert Kennedy and many others that raised the problem of government telling social media to remove content such as crazy ideas like COVID came from a lab, or crazy ideas
right.
that maybe
right.
masks
right.
aren't as effective as Dr. Fauci says they are, or vaccines guarantee that you will never, ever, ever get COVID. So what we saw was the government putting its finger on the scales in favor of themselves. So that's
and also oftentimes getting it wrong, right? I mean, a lot of what they said was misinformation was right, and right, yeah.
That's exactly it. And in fact, you actually heard the Washington press corps just recently asking the Biden administration if they were going to try and block or censor President Trump when he was going on X to talk with Elon Musk, because that was a, quote, threat to democracy or a threat to freedom and stuff like that. And so that's the thing. As frustrated as I, as a Republican, as I, as a conservative, may get with social media and the decisions they make, I would much rather be in a position where I can vote with my feet, as we've seen with something as simple as Bud Light, than having the government come in and dictate who can say what and what websites and apps we can visit and download.
I could not agree more. I think you're exactly right. I mean, I'll take my chances with a private company rather than having the government come in and tell us what we can say. I mean, I do believe that, one of our most cherished rights is the right to free speech. And that right has really been under assault. In fact, mostly from the left lately. It used to be the left used to be the champions of the First Amendment, but now they want to tell you what you can and can't say. They want to tell you what you can and can't be exposed to in terms of what you listen to or you watch. And so you all did. The reason I wanted to have you on the More Money Show is because you all at Netflix won a landmark case in the Supreme Court, and I'd love for you to tell us about that.
Yeah, thanks for kind of teeing that up. So my company, NetChoice, and I brought a suit against the states of Florida and Texas. Now, don't get me wrong, I love those states. I went to school in Texas. I love Florida, great bastions of freedom. But they had passed laws that would force websites to host content that they don't want to host. Stuff like pro-Nazi propaganda, stuff like encouraging and endorsing dogfighting. A lot of awful content.
By the way, hold on. Let me just interrupt you for that. I don't care what it is. If you own a platform, like I have this radio show, Carl, I can decide what I want on the air and what I don't want on the air. I can decide who I want my guests to be. It would be like the government saying, hey, Steve Moore, you have to have Kamala Harris on and you have to have this person on. I mean, come on. This is private, it's privately owned. And what are they going to do? They're going to tell you who you have to associate with and who you're going to have on. And is the New York Times now going to have conservative opinion on their editorial page?
Well, yeah, when they try that, editors get fired. And
right.
I mean, but that's exactly right. The case on which, so this was already decided decades, if not hundreds of years ago, by the U.S. Supreme Court, time and time again. They had actually said in a case in Florida back in the 80s that the Miami Herald was not required to publish an op-ed if they didn't want to publish it. Right. And it's the exact same thing. So what the court said, and this was on July 1st, so we were kind of sandwiched between two also big decisions, Corner Post and Trump immunity. But the decision for ours just made crystal clear, and not shockingly, that the First Amendment applies to the internet, and the First Amendment applies to social media platforms and websites to decide what content they want to host and what type of people they will allow on their site. Just like the Lions Club or the American Legion can decide who gets to use their town halls.
Right. And so this is a big victory for freedom of speech. So congratulations on that. And so Who was it? Was this Google, or who was the plaintiff in this case?
So the plaintiff was NetChoice and CCIA. So we're trade associations, and so we have standing to defend. And ultimately, we're up there defending not just our members do include Google and Facebook, but also Etsy.
Sure.
One of the things in the Florida law would require Etsy to sell sweaters with swastikas. Now, maybe Etsy wants to do that.
That's ridiculous.
Probably Etsy sellers don't want to be associated with that content. Yeah. And at the end of the day, this is great for every single American, because what it means is Truth Social doesn't have to host Kamala Harris. What it means is X can create community notes. What it means is that the power resides with people to decide where and what they want to go, see, and use, just like we always had. Yes. And ironically, as you pointed out, the left has gone somewhat apoplectic on this, to the point where a former White House National Economic Advisor wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, Tim Wu, entitled Free Speech, the First Amendment has gone too far.
I remember that op-ed, and my jaw dropped when I read it. I mean, it is so outrageous. They'd say we have to restrain free speech, but folks, this is our most fundamental right. There's a reason it's number one in the Bill of Rights, because it is fundamental to our freedoms. And I don't want, Carl, anybody on the left or the right interfering with my freedom of speech. Now, one last thing, and we've only got a couple minutes to go. By the way, I'm talking to Carl Szabo, who is at the NetChoice, which does an amazing job at protecting our liberties and protecting the supremacy of our great technology companies that dominate the world. So they keep calling these companies monopolies, like Google, Apple, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. Even you see sometimes even the retail Amazon is a monopoly, and yet you look at these industries and, like, let's take the example of search engine. Now, Google's the biggest, but there must be 24 search engines you can go to if you don't like Google, right?
Absolutely. So this is, I would just ask that some of these intelligentsia take a Latin class. You can't have monopolies. You can't have mono meaning one and plural. It doesn't work. Right. It is the most incongruous statement. So what we're actually seeing is this is not about going after, quote, anti-competitive behavior, because there is legitimate anti-competitive behavior out there in many industries that are going unaddressed, like Ticketmaster. But when it comes to things like search, are you kidding me? Bing is owned by Microsoft, the largest company on the planet. Then you have DuckDuckGo. If I'm going to look for restaurants, I'll go to Yelp or OpenTable. So this is not about protecting against harm to consumers. This is about avenging a personal vendetta against success. And that's the fundamental problem across the political spectrum. In America, anyone can make it so long as they don't make too much. That's the new mantra of our government.
And Carl, just to emphasize this point, because we're coming to an end here, but this has been a great conversation. Because look, we have mostly a pro-business conservative audience on this station. And a lot of them probably, I don't like Facebook. I don't like Google. And that's fine. I don't like some of the things they do either. But you know what? Turn it off if you don't like it. If you don't like it, it's like, you said with Bud Light. If you don't like Bud Light, look out what a change they can make. So you can make an impact with your own decisions. But folks, you don't want the government making these decisions for you, because Carl, as a libertarian, I fear big government more than I do Google or Facebook or these other tech companies.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just remember, the free market is the greatest decider of what people want, and money will follow accordingly.
Well, you need to tell Kamala Harris that, because she wants to put price controls on everything. She doesn't understand the free price system. We're gonna have to get you in front of her and explain why that doesn't work. Well, Carl, thank you. Keep up the great work. Congratulations on the great victory for freedom of speech and First Amendment rights, and keep at it. Carl Szabo, of course, is at NetChoice, folks, a great organization. How do people? What's the website?
Yep, netchoice.org, netchoice.org. You can also follow us on X at NetChoice, and you can follow me at Carl Szabo, CarlSza, B as in boy, O as in October.
Okay, thank you so much, Carl. Great. Have a great weekend, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. We'll be right back.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. I am your host, economist Steve Moore. I always say we have the best. I'm not the greatest radio talk show host, but I have some of the greatest guests who come on our show, and one of them, who's been a regular, is Rich Lowry, who is, of course, been the long-term editor of National Review, one of the most important magazines in the country, and it has obviously a conservative point of view. And so Rich and I have been friends for probably 25 or 30 years. Rich, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Okay, I want to get right in.
A guest on. I was waiting to hear who these brilliant guests were.
That is you, my friend. So Rich is just a fantastic political mind, among other things. So how worried should Trump voters be right now after the convention?
I think a little worried. I mean, clearly Democrats have increased their chances. The bottom had begun to fall out for Joe Biden towards the end prior to his defenestration there. Debate fallout, but then it just all fallout from Democrats and friendly media savaging him for a couple of weeks. And you were right. You were always consistently saying he was going to end up going. And sure enough, he did. And she's kind of at best a replacement level Democrat, but that's enough to bring Democrats home and to make it a really close race again. So certainly Trump's margin for error is much less than it was a month ago.
And so what was your overall takeaway from the convention? I have to confess, I didn't really watch much of it. I watched the first half of Kamala Harris' speech, and then I got a little bored with it. But do you think that convention was a success, a draw? How do you see it?
I think it was probably a success. It was a very annoying convention, among other things. I mean, it ran so late. You know, you had a lot of the primetime speakers coming on at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. But, you know, they made the case for her and her speech. You know, there's nothing the average person would have seen in that speech that would have alarmed or disturbed them or made them nervous. And she was a confident enough performer. So it's been a great month. I mean, besides, I think that the choice of Tim Walz was not optimal, but probably defensible, not a disaster. And the economic plan was horrible. But otherwise, it's hard to imagine a better 4 weeks, but the standard hasn't been very high, right? If the media is going to praise everything you do and the whole Democratic establishment is going to fall in line, it's going to be pretty, and all you have to do is talk from a teleprompter. It's going to be pretty easy to succeed, and she has so far.
So I looked at this in a fairly simple way, and you can kind of expand on it or tell me if you're wrong. But, this is an oversimplification, but, the Trump and the Republicans want to talk about the economy, right? They want to talk about the kitchen table issues, and Democrats want to talk about sort of identity politics, and they want to talk about abortion.
Yeah, abortion is the best issue they have going for them. All the polling shows that. It's led to this bizarre, you wrote about this, the hostage taking of the idea of freedom.
Freedom.
I don't even think abortion is a freedom because there's the interest of another person is involved, but nothing else they support has anything to do with freedom. In fact, it's the opposite. So they sell their agenda in terms of security, which at least makes more sense. But I think what Republicans need to do is not just talk about the economy and the issues. That's important. But Trump needs to make the character case against her, not, the sense of personal life or anything like that, but that she's too weak. She's too dishonest. She's too phony to be president of the United States. It all needs to come back to that. And they have a massive amount of material to work with. I was going back and looking at the 2004 presidential campaign, Bush versus Kerry. And Bush basically won that campaign based on 13 words, Kerry said, about, voting for the $87 billion before he voted against it. But it's because they didn't make it just about the policy, about the gap. They made him into a flip-flopping Washington insider who's too weak on defense to be president. And they have much more material to work with Kamala, but it all needs to come back to that kind of case against her.
Yeah, there was a very good piece by our mutual friend, Jim Pearson. I think that was in the Wall Street Journal, or I forget where I read it, but Jim's a smart guy. And he was saying that he was likening this a little bit to the Dukakis campaign. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that one, Rich. I think you might be a little younger than I am, but I do. And, they people, I had forgotten this, Rich, but he says that coming out of the Democratic convention,
17
Dukakis had a 17, which is amazing.
17.
And what they were able to do was show him as being kind of incompetent and a liberal. And that was, of course, who was that ran that campain for Bush?
It was a guy from South Carolina, Lee Atwater.
Lee Atwater ran a great campaign.
You can't talk about flag, Pledge of Allegiance. You can't talk about Willie Brown. Right. You can't talk about the Boston Harbor. But all that,
and he did.
The presidential races, you really need to disqualify the other person. It's just that their platform is bad. That's part of the disqualification, but it needs to be deeper than that. Obviously, Democrats are trying to do that to Trump, and he needs to do it in turn. He just needs to do it in a disciplined and focused way.
So I'd add one thing to what you said, which is that she and Tim Walz truly know nothing about business. They know nothing about the free enterprise system. They are, in fact, incredibly hostile to business. You look at their tax plan, their regulations. They hate business. In fact, I don't know if I'd go quite that far, but they view businesses, especially businesses that make money, as almost the enemy. Yeah. And I don't think that's where the American people are. Do you?
No, they're not. And it's surprising, given how she's trying to rebrand towards the center away from where she was in 19 and 20, how she's enunciated new positions that are part of the left, and has picked a governor who believes basically and governed on the basis of everything she said in 19 and 20. So I think, as Trump said at some point, if you didn't, it's certainly true still, that this is the most left-wing ticket that we've ever encountered. The only competition, I think, would be FDR and Henry Wallace in 1940. But even they weren't woke. They were part of the left on economics, but they weren't woke.
On social issues, yeah. Well, Rich, so what advice would you give to Donald J. Trump at this point, if you were one of his key political advisors, in terms of how to deal with Kamala Harris?
Yeah, well, one, he's already doing this. He needs to find ways to get his message out that are an end run around the traditional media. These podcasters, most of whom I haven't heard of before, but have huge audiences. And then I would think it may be the rallies have outlived their usefulness a little bit, because the media is so obsessed now. It doesn't matter if 90 minutes is on message. If 2 minutes isn't, that's all you hear about.
Exactly.
I would tend to do more focused events, like a border visit. It's about the border. Doesn't matter really what you say. If you sit down with the families of fentanyl victims for a roundtable, and Trump's great in that forum, he doesn't have to read from a teleprompter, but it's an event about that. Do that with guys who work fracking, just do that over and over again. And again, bring the issues back to hit the issues, but bring it back to how she's a phony and can't be trusted, which is true.
Well, one last thing.
Of being true.
Good advice. I'm talking to Rich Lowry, who is the editor at National Review and one of the smartest political minds I know. So the Trump campaign, I think, also needs to talk about their record and what, if you compare just side by side on the economy, I'm sounding frustrated because I am. There's a great piece the other day about how, Democrats have controlled Washington for 12 of the last 16 years, and they're blaming all the problems on Donald Trump.
Yeah, exactly. So do you want to go back to a past that was 3 years ago or 4 years ago, when inflation was low and the economy was growing and real wages were growing? Or do you want to stick with the failed present? That's the question. And again, I think that's an eminently makeable case. It's true. It's right there. All the material is there.
Rich Lowry, thank you very much for taking some time out of your weekend to join us on the More Money Show. We'll be right back, folks. It's the More Money Show on WABC.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio, the number one talk radio station on these United States. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy weekend and hopefully restful weekend to listen to, I think we're one of the top economic shows in the country. We talk about the economy, talk about finance. Folks, I want to get into the issue of freedom. What does freedom mean? What does freedom mean to you? And the reason I ask that question is that the Democrats have sort of hijacked that term. They've twisted it. If you watched any of the Democratic National Convention, and I watched a little bit of it, but all the signs were freedom, freedom, freedom and faith, freedom and faith. And I thought, well, wait a minute. What does freedom mean? Because here's how I define freedom. Freedom is liberty. Freedom is the ability to make your own choices, not to have the government make choices for you. Freedom is not having the government tell you what you have to do. Freedom is to pay reasonable taxes, not have the government take your property away from you. In other words, freedom is freedom from government. Government doesn't give you freedom. You are endowed by your creator with freedoms. Government can only take freedom away from you. So this is kind of a juxtaposition that the Democrats have created, a kind of weird redefinition of the term where they say, oh, freedom is freedom to have enough money. Well, look, if the government takes $1 from me and gives $1 to you, that doesn't increase freedom. I'm $1 poorer, I'm $1 less free, and you're $1 richer, but the government took the money from me. How does that enhance freedom? Now, they would say, for example, abortion is a freedom right, and we could have an argument about that, whether, and I don't want to get into that argument, but even putting aside the abortion argument, they are saying that things like freedom from gun violence is a freedom that you should have as an American citizen. Now, I believe that. I believe we should be free of gun violence. I don't want to be shot. Nobody wants to be shot. Nobody wants to have a pistol put at their head when you're being robbed. But how do they know that taking your people's guns away is going to reduce the amount of gun violence? There's no evidence of that. In fact, I don't look. I'm not. And by the way, I'm for reasonable gun restrictions. I'm not, totally doctrinaire on this. I do think we should have reasonable restrictions on guns, but the evidence is pretty clear that the areas of the country that have the most gun control on private citizens are the areas that have the most gun violence. So some of my friends on the left are going to have to show me how taking away people's guns is going to make me safer, and I think the evidence is dubious on that at best. So what I'm saying is I don't think that there are solutions of more government and taking away government guns from law-abiding citizens is going to reduce gun violence. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, but I don't think the evidence shows that there's anything on their side of the equation. Then they say, now how about this one? Do you think that someone should have the right to join a union or not join a union? In other words, shouldn't it be their individual choice? I say yes. They say no. They want to require everyone to join a union, even if it's against their will. Well, if you require someone to join the union to get the job, I think that's an invasion of their freedom. And look, if you want to be in a union, I think you should be free to join a union. Absolutely. I believe in the right and freedom of association, but that's very different than forcing someone to join a union against their will. Do you see what I mean? So you're free to join a union and I'm free not to join a union. And that way we're both happy, except the left isn't happy because they want me to join a union. I'll give you another example, and one that I care so much about, and that is the freedom for parents to choose the best kids for their school. That would seem to be a fundamental right of every parent, a fundamental civil right of every parent, and one of the best ways to help low income and children who come from, let's say low income backgrounds. So I want to say every student parent and family should have the right to send their kid to a great school. What a concept, right? They're against that. No, they want to force low income kids to go to crappy public schools in crappy neighborhoods. And they say that that's freedom. No, it isn't. The freedom is to be able to send your kid to whatever school you want to. They are, excuse me, they are on the side of tyranny and government making choices. And I'm on the side of basically saying, no, you make your own choice. Finally, they want to raise taxes through the wazoo. I've talked about this earlier on the show. They want the biggest tax increase in American history. They want to have taxes that could go up to 40, 50, 60, 70, 80%. They want to tax you at death. They want to tax you when you die. That's what liberals want to do. If you spend your whole life building up a business, building up a fortune, achieve the American dream, they want to take 40, 50, 60% of it away from you when you die. I'm sorry, that's not freedom. Folks, taking away someone's lifetime's earnings, no, that is not freedom. That is the opposite of freedom. So what I'm telling you is that only government can take away your freedom. Government cannot assign you freedoms because these are endowed rights that you have from your creator. I wish my Democratic friends would read the Constitution and read the Declaration of Independence, because this is what America is about: the freedom to make your own choices and not have the government take away your rights. And what they are saying, the left is saying, is big government is your friend. Big government is what gives you your freedoms. No, it isn't. It is what takes your freedoms away. By the way, every single oppressor in history, whether it was Hitler or Stalin or some of the great villains throughout history, they've always used, I'm going to use I'm going to use government to give you all these rights. And what do? They end up every episode of famine, every episode of genocide, every episode of slavery was all done at the power of government. So let's not give government more power if we want freedom. Let's give them a lot less power over our lives. Okay, that's my lecture for today. We have coming up two of the very best in the financial business who I love having on the show, Bob and Ryan Payne, and they're going to tell you how you can make more money on the More Money Show.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show as we begin our second hour of the show. Thank you so much for joining in. We are on every Saturday afternoon from 1 to 3 p.m., and I am so appreciative of my regular listeners. We have a great audience, and we have a big audience, and so we're so pleased that we have so many of you carving out a little of your time on a Saturday afternoon to become even better educated than you already are on economics and finance and politics. And if you're a new listener to the show, thank you. Thank you for listening in. Most other stations, if you don't turn that dial, but if you were to turn the dial, you're going to hear a lot of boring infomercials that go on about selling you this household product or that household product. It's boring as can be, or some financial product. No, we're about giving you fresh information about what's going on with the economy, what's going on with politics, how you can make more money, which is what we try to aspire to do in this show. This is our fourth year being on the air, and it's our first full year of being on for 2 hours, and we are affiliated throughout the country. I know people are listening as far south as Georgia and as far north as Maine, and we have people who call in all the way from Chicago, from Tennessee. We even had some callers in from Arizona a couple of weeks ago. So I know we have a massive audience because you care about our country. All right. So let me get down to it. I want to talk about a couple of quick things in this opening segment. One is about this issue of how the government, the Biden administration, lied to us about the job numbers. And they've been lying to us for the last couple of years about how many jobs are being created. Now, I've told many of you that if you want to get the information about Trump's record on the economy versus Biden and Kamala Harris, go to unleashprosperitynow.com, unleashprosperitynow.com, and you can pull out what we call our chart book, which is called the Trump Economic Miracle and the Biden Bust, because Biden's performance on the economy has been a bust. But you can see side by side on about 25 different statistics how Trump performed versus how Biden performed on everything from gasoline prices to the price of eggs to the overall inflation rate to the job picture to the stock market to small business conditions to interest rates. You can see it and you show it to your friends and say, look, Trump does better on almost every one of these. Well, the one statistic where Trump actually did less well than Biden and Kamala Harris was on jobs. But whoa, hold on for a second. It turns out they were lying to us about the numbers. So you probably have heard that the Bureau of Labor Statistics just put out a report saying, whoops, we made a big mistake. We overcounted the number of jobs in the past, I think over a 14-month period by 818,000. 818,000 jobs that we thought we had, we didn't have. So that's a big number. That's not a rounding error, folks. That's not a little error. That's a pretty big error. Now, I know we have a big labor force. We have something like between 100 and 150 million people in the workforce. So it's a big labor force. But to get it that wrong it means that there's something wrong with your system. But I'm not done yet, because on top of that 818,000 jobs that they overcounted, every first Friday of the month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Labor Department, puts out a report on how many jobs have been created. And that's, in fact, I'm always on with Maria Bartiromo at 8:30 in the morning on Fox Business News when that report comes out. And we talk about it for about a half hour on that show. So I've been pay very close attention to these jobs reports. So what we found was that they would come out with these numbers. They say, 325,000 jobs were created this month. And wow, fantastic. Wow, that's an incredible performance. And then the next month we say, no, it wasn't 325,000. It was only 260,000 or whatever it is. They kept revising these numbers down, sometimes as much as 70, 80,000 jobs, way, way overestimated. And here's what's suspicious about this, folks. In something like 12 of the last 14 months, the errors were all in the direction of estimating too many jobs, not too little. Now, if this were just a random error, you'd expect 6 months we overshot a little bit, 6 months we undershot, and you'd think that over time, that these would cancel each other out. No, they have overestimated job creation over the last 14 months for something like 350,000 jobs. So this isn't a random error. It is a manipulation of the data. Now, I don't know if it's intentional or not. I know Donald Trump thinks it's intentional, and he may be right. I'm not going to cast aspersions against the statisticians at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But what I am going to say is there's something really wrong here when they've overestimated the number of jobs by 1.2 million. That's practically all the workers in the whole state of Connecticut, for goodness sakes. I mean, it's a giant number of jobs to be getting wrong. And so they have painted for you a false picture on the economy. No, it is not as good as their official numbers state. Now, I know a lot of you know this because if you look at polls, over 50% of Americans think America's in a recession right now. Now, we're not technically in a recession. The economy is growing. It's not growing very fast, but it's growing. But here's the thing. People's incomes are falling. They don't have the good jobs. They don't have enough hours to work 40 hours a week. A lot of people are working, but they're only working 20 or 25 or 30 hours a week. So people's incomes are falling. People are $2,100 poorer today than they were when Trump left office. And so, again, I'm not saying that they lied. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But I believe that this requires an investigation about how Biden's Bureau of Labor Statistics could be wrong. And now there's only two real explanations here. One explanation is they lied. They just fudged the numbers to make them look better because they want Biden to look better. Or the second explanation is they're just incompetent. They can't count. And so I don't think either one of those explanations makes them come out smelling like a rose. But my point is, you can't believe the numbers that the Biden administration is coming out with. Now, the next thing I wanted to mention is that this story that just came out that Ford Motor Company is scrapping electric SUVs. Now, that's a big story because the government keeps telling these car companies you have to buy you have to sell electric vehicles, and the public is saying, well, we don't want electric vehicles, and the government and the Biden administration says, I don't care if you like them or not, you have to buy them. And Kamala Harris says the same thing. You're gonna do what we tell you to do. You're gonna buy the. I was talked earlier on the show about freedom. Freedom should be able to buy your own car. The Democrats are saying we're the Freedom Party, but you can't buy your own car. You can't have a light bulb that you want. You can't have an air conditioner. You can't have a gas stove. But we're the Freedom Party. And so the point of this, though, is they keep trying to mandate that the car companies make these electric vehicles, but they're losing money on them. So these car companies are losing $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for every electric vehicle they make. You can't stay in business if you're losing money every time you make a new car. I mean, that's the worst business model I've ever heard of. And so what Ford is saying is they will make these hybrids, which, by the way, people like hybrids. My wife has a hybrid. She has one of those Porsche hybrid minivans. It's a beautiful car, and it's great. We charge it at night, and she can use it buzzing around town. You can't go on a long trip with it because you only get about 25 or 30 minutes worth of juice. 25 or 30 miles worth of juice on the charge. But it's a nice way to have a dual system. Well, guess what? The left doesn't even want you to have a hybrid. No, you cannot use gasoline. You cannot use oil. You cannot use coal. You cannot use any of these sinister fuels. You have to use an electric battery. But folks, guess what? We get 70% of our energy for the batteries. The electricity comes from coal and from natural gas. So what does it matter whether it emits out of the gas pipe or whether it emits out of the power plant? I mean, are these people stupid or what? And so now you've got Ford finally saying, we're giving up. We don't care what the government says. We're not making these electric vehicles. And I'm look, good. And I'm not against electric vehicles. I actually believe, folks, that if Joe Biden had never been elected, that the electric vehicle industry would probably be further along. People don't want the government telling us what to do, right? We want to make our own choices. This is America, the last time I checked. And to have the United States federal government say, you can buy this car, you can't buy that car. You know, it goes back to the old Henry Ford joke about the Model T when it first came out. And he used to say, you can have that Model T in any color you want as long as it's black. Well, that was a private company saying that. I don't want the government telling me what I can buy, what kind of light bulb I can buy, what kind of air conditioner I can buy, what kind of car I can buy. But this is our future. And I'm going to guarantee you that Kamala Harris will double down on this. She will double down on this if she is elected president. So the freedom ticket is not Kamala Harris and Tim Wirtz. The freedom ticket is Donald J. Trump. Folks, we have a great show in the next hour. I hope you will hold on. We have some fantastic guests coming up. We're going to talk about the economy. We're going to talk about finance. And I appreciate you tuning in. And we're going to be right back in 1 minute.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WBC Talk Radio. As all of you know, who are regular listeners of this show, there are 5 pillars of prosperity that will include things like free trade. They include things like low taxes, less government spending, less regulation. And one of the most important pillars of prosperity is stable money. I have worked with one of the top economists in the country, Louis Woodhill, who has a new book out called, what is it again, Louis? What's the name of the new book?
Engineering Stable Money. It's not out yet. I finished the draft, and now I just need to get it published.
Okay. And so Louis has a formula for how we can get back to 3 to 4% economic growth. And the reason I wanted to have Louis on the show is because this is absolutely critical to solving our budget problem, our jobs problem, our debt problem, and our prosperity problem in this country. And so, Louis, walk us through why it's so important that we get it back on this 3 to 4% growth path. And I think a lot of people are going to be skeptical. They're going to say, Louis Woodhill is wrong. We can't grow that fast.
Well, you know, after 24 years of stagnation, I can see why people would think that. But this is not normal for America. America, since its
wait. So hold on. You're saying that since the beginning of this, we've had a slow growth century so far.
Yes, the 21st century. It just happens that right after the turn of the century, we went into a monetary era that I call discretionary chaos. And what I mean by that is that the variability of the real value of the dollar shot up to the level of the 70s from a fairly low level from 1983 to 2000. You and I met in 2000, which was a very prosperous year, if you remember. And then for some reason, Alan Greenspan just lost it. You know, it's really kind of strange that he would, after having given us the great moderation, would just kind of go off the cliff. And you can measure the volatility of something by the ratio of the standard deviation of the data points to the mean. And we went from having, during the great moderation, we had volatility of about 8.5%, which wasn't as good as under the Bretton Woods gold standard, which was about 6.4%. We shot up to volatility of 24.32%, which was worse than the great stagflation of the 1970s. Like I say, they just completely lost it, and it in a very curious way. So I don't know why they did that, but
well, wait, hold on. Let me just because our audience isn't economists. So
yeah, sure,
when you say he lost it, I mean, what are you talking about? What you mean? He let inflation get out of control, or what?
Well, if you want to walk through it, what happened was the Fed has never figured out that supply side tax cuts are deflationary, and if they don't add money to the system, you're going to get a recession. Reagan got caught by that in 1981, and then Bush 40, we almost had a recession after Gingrich's capital gains tax cut in 96, but Greenspan pulled us out of it just in time. It did cause the Asian currency crisis, though. But in 2001, you know, when Bush 43 got his tax cut passed, Greenspan did not offset that by expanding the money supply, and we got the 2001 recession. And then Greenspan kind of panicked, and we had 4 years, probably the longest inflationary streak in history, from about late 2001 to mid 2006. And that inflated the housing bubble. See, if people sense inflation, they act to protect themselves from the inflation. And the way you protect yourself from inflation is to buy hard assets with borrowed money. And that was the housing bubble. Then in mid-2006, the Fed changed course, deflated a little. That popped the housing bubble. It started the great financial crisis going. Then they panicked again and reflated to mid-2008. And then they just, what happened was the Fed started paying interest on bank reserves on October 7th of 2008. That produced the most violent monetary deflation in all of U.S. history. To get to the second most violent monetary deflation, you have to go back to early 1782.
Wow.
Wow. And that just completely crashed the economy, crashed the financial markets.
Right. Yes.
And and then
so Louis, hold on. We only have a few minutes here. So we are where we are right now, and the Fed is going to. They just announced this week that they're going to basically there's de facto announcement that they're going to cut rates in September. If you were the Fed chairman, what would you be doing right now?
I would abandon interest rate targeting and target commodity prices instead.
Now, what does that mean?
Well, the Fed can target any one thing. In other words, the Fed controls all prices in dollars are the ratio of the real value of something to the real value of the dollar. So the Fed has control of the real value of the dollar if it wants to exercise it. And so it can target the dollar price of any one thing and adjust monetary policy to make it come out at that price. And so you're saying commodity prices. Yeah.
So you're saying if we just take the index of commodities and just hold that constant, because we know what that is in real time. I look at that index every day, and just hold that number constant. And by the way, that includes everything from gas to oil to cotton to copper, blah, blah, blah. And you hold that constant, then you said that's a kind of a proxy for a stable dollar.
Correct. In 234 years, that has been true.
Okay. Now, so I agree with you on that. You've sold me on that. I think we should stop talking about interest rates and start talking about keeping prices stable by looking at commodities. In fact, when I was when I was nominated to be on the Federal Reserve Board, I was in favor of that exact thing. So that is step number one. Let's start targeting the commodity prices and keep them stable and forget about it. Let interest rates, let them go wherever they're going to go, right?
Let the market set interest rates, because interest rates are supposed to represent the cost of capital, which is real.
Yes. Okay. All right, good. So now step two is I want to go back to my first question. Okay, you and I want to get to 3.5% to 4% growth. A lot of people say it's impossible. We just can't do that anymore. Okay, so Louis, we both agree that we need to have the Fed's target commodity prices instead of dealing with the interest rate issue, and that will create a stable dollar. But we want to get to 4% growth, or at least 3.5% to 4% growth. A lot of people say that's not possible. Once we've achieved the stable money, what next do we have to do to get to faster growth?
Well, first of all, stable money will itself get you to faster growth.
It will.
Because in the U.S., growth is a function of capital investment and nothing else. It's not a function of the labor force. It's a function of produced assets. And unstable money causes people to invest less, invest shorter term, and demand a higher return. All of that stuff will unwind and give us higher growth just from stable money. Also, the U.S. will suck in all of the capital from all over the world into the safe haven. But basically, compared to so I'm hoping that just stabilizing the dollar will at least get us back to the return on assets that we had during the Great Moderation. Mm-hmm. From there, to get to permanent 4% growth, we would need to invest an additional 4.4% of GDP in real assets.
Yep.
And that would just get us back to the investment level of, say, the mid-'80s. We've done it before.
Okay.
But the way you encourage investment is to stop discouraging it.
Right. So I was just going to say, Louis, I don't know if you've looked at, I'm looking at this horrific plan by Kamala Harris. She wants to double the capital gains tax. She wants to tax unrealized capital gains. She wants to increase the business tax. That's going to destroy investment in this country.
It would destroy the economy, and then it would get reversed if she could get something like that passed, which I obviously hope she can't. But like, for example, remember, the Laffer curve. I took the Laffer curve in my book and put it on a rigorous mathematical basis, which would be based upon present value. And when I talked to Art Laffer about this, he agreed that the right way to do the Laffer curve is on a present value basis.
Yes, right. Yeah.
To pay for eliminating the entire corporate income tax from where it is now, we would need 0.04 of a percentage point of additional GDP growth.
That's all?
That's all. That's less than the BEA can even measure. And so if you understand the federal government's actual finances, you would never raise taxes.
Right.
If a tax increase had any effect on GDP growth, you wouldn't do it. And that's
so
why
growth is everything.
Growth is everything.
Yeah.
I just, for fun, I took the CBO's latest growth estimates. They're saying that we're going to grow at 1.68% for the next 30 years.
Yeah, ridiculous.
If we had grown at that rate from 1790 on, if our founding fathers had bought into that stagnation thing, we would have the GDP per capita of Togo.
So look, Louis, we only have about a minute left. So this has been a fascinating conversation. So the bottom line, though, is we can get to 3.5% to 4% growth. I've seen your data. And if we do that, we will we'll bend that curve on the debt And so, in other words, I think the reason what you're saying in your book is so important is that we can grow our way out of this, right? And so to do what Kamala Harris is talking about is 100% the wrong thing to do.
Absolutely. It's literally insane. Yeah. It assumes that you won't have you can double taxes and have no effect on people's behavior. And that's just not true.
Lunatic. So, and what's the I know it's not out yet, but give us the title of the book again. I'm talking to Louis Woodhill. The book is called?
It's going to be called Engineering Stable Money and Permanent 4% Economic Growth.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, Louis Woodhill, thanks so much for joining. Folks, this is the More Money Show. We'll be right back.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. I hope you're learning a lot from my great guests that I've had on today, because I've learned a lot from them, and you're going to learn a lot from my final guest, and that is Katie Gorka. And yes, she is the wife of the great Sebastian Gorka, and I go on his radio show all the time, so I want Katie to come on my radio show. And so, Katie, thanks so much for joining.
Hey, I love being here. Thank you.
And I was asking about your affiliation, and you're obviously an author. You worked at the Heritage Foundation, but you said you are now the chairman of the Republican Party in Fairfax County?
Yeah, that's right. And I have Virginia. To say, before I was at Heritage, I was at the Department of Homeland Security. And, I spent my life looking at foreign threats, and I finally realized, actually, the threat's right here at home. So yes. I figured I need to get involved locally to save my country.
So Virginia is this is not the exact point of our conversation, but since we're talking about it, Virginia is a swing state. Trump thinks he can win Virginia. It's been a while since the Republicans have won Virginia at the national level. What do you think?
100%. And I think the fact that Robert Kennedy Jr. just threw his lot in with Trump gives us even more, strength here in Fairfax County, here in Virginia. I think absolutely Fairfax and Virginia are in play. And I'll tell you part of the reason why. Fairfax has been going blue, but we've got a lot of legal immigrants. They are not happy with what's going on at the border. And I tell you what, I think they're going to be voting for Trump in force.
So you're in Fairfax County. Where do you live in Fairfax?
Yeah, I'm right in McLean.
McLean. Okay. So if I may, I'd love to ask you a question, because I lived in McLean for 15 or 16 years. We recently moved out of the McLean area. But when we were there, my son went to a high school called Thomas Jefferson High School. I think you can probably guess where this is famous. Going.
Yeah.
And so, when he went there, I mean, it's the top science and engineering school in the country, practically, and incredibly gifted and incredibly smart kids. And he got in and, did really well there, met a lot of people. But it was at that time, probably, I'm just guessing just from the people I would see in the parking lot, but at least 60% Asians. And so now they have all these quotas at Thomas Jefferson. And a lot of people are claiming it's not the same school that it was. And I just wonder if you have any observations about this.
Oh, yeah. This has been a very big point of contention. So Thomas Jefferson consistently ranked either first or second in the country. And it's, I think, now recently dropped down to 5 and probably going further. Yeah, Fairfax County has been at the front of the line when it comes to the, equity agenda. And it's really, and it's hurt not just Thomas Jefferson, it's hurt all our schools. There's been a lot of articles coming out recently because they're doing a major rezoning of boundaries in Fairfax County for the schools. And what one journalist has discovered, she's arguing that the reason that's happening is we have 5 of our high schools at risk of losing accreditation because they have so many illegals who are non-English speakers, and it's pulling everybody's scores down. It's pulling attendance rates down, and 5 schools might lose accreditation. So we've got big problems here in Fairfax County.
So, and by the way, I guess what they want to do is force some kids to go to those schools so they can lift up the. How is that fair? I mean, that's ridiculous.
Exactly.
Okay, so tell us about the book. You were telling me it came out in April. It's called Next Gen Marxism, and you've written this, co-authored it with a good friend of mine, Mike Gonzalez, who's one of the smartest guys I know. So I was just reading the little excerpt from it, and I thought was so interesting. It says the book Next Gen Marxism explains how it is not Soviet Marxism, but a Marxism that was shaped by European intellectuals, adapted and refined by America's student radicals in the 60s that have created these social ills. So what do you mean by that?
Oh, yeah. And I think it's so interesting, especially now with the Democrat convention having just taken place in Chicago, where protesters were saying, make it great like 68. Because you remember, right? There were major protests.
I grew up in Chicago and I was 8 years old, but I remember it's one of my first sort of political memories. I'm like, what the heck is going on? You could see the mayhem and the chaos and the violence in the streets. So I remember it. I remember it very well.
Yeah. So, initially, when Mike and I wrote the book, it was really because of the COVID shutdowns and what was happening in the schools. Yes. But, I think the things that we have seen since that time, particularly the protests on our college campuses, now the protests at the DNC, it just reinforces for us that Marxism, shockingly, has reared its ugly head again. And
how do you hold on? How do you define what is Marxism? Because I think a lot of people, our listeners, don't even know what I mean, they know it's probably a bad thing, but I don't think people really know what that means.
Right. Well, okay. So it was originally a purely sort of economic worldview. It said you have workers being exploited by owners, and that the workers would rebel, overthrow the owners, and that you would have a world run with sort of common ownership, and things would be much more equitable and more fair. Oh, and by the way, Marx also said, let's get rid of the family. Let's get rid of traditional marriage. He actually wanted a community of women that would be available to men. So he was one sick dude, okay? I will say that. What we're seeing today is today's Marxists have replaced that split between workers and owners, and today it's white people and white adjacent versus everybody else. Anybody who's a different ethnicity, a different sexual orientation, right? A different gender. But it's the important thing about Marxism is it's a worldview that says the world is irreparably divided between oppressor and oppressed, and that we cannot make peace with each other.
So who? I get that. I know that about So who are the oppressors?
The white people, us.
The white people. Okay, right. Yeah. Although we have people of all colors.
To be fair, and the white people and the quote white adjacent. So today it includes Asians and it generally includes Jewish people.
Right. So because Jews do very well at school and Asians do very well, I was wondering if they were oppressors too.
Oh, they are. Yes.
And who are the oppressed?
It's basically anybody else. It's basically anybody who's not white, anybody who is claims to be a different gender, anybody who's LGBT. I would say those are the oppressed.
So it's all really based on kind of racial terms more than class.
Yes. Well, yes. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
If you've got a black family that's very rich, could they be oppressors?
No. I'm sorry that they cannot. Nope.
Okay. And what about Hispanics who do really well? Are they oppressors?
No. And let's be clear. Very impoverished white people are still the oppressors, right?
Okay.
So the whole thing makes no sense. But that's what it is.
So what is it that they're after? In other words, I'm trying to figure out the mentality behind this because it seems pretty bizarre to me. So they're saying people are successful, and white are oppressors because they've worked hard and created great businesses and And then the blacks and Hispanics are the people who've been oppressed. So what do we do about that?
Well, I have to be really clear, because what they actually want is they want to overthrow the United States as it stands. They want a Marxist revolution. They want socialism.
Where has that ever worked?
Oh, that's just a small detail, really.
So they want Cuba, they want North Korea, they want East Germany. They want, they want Argentina, they want Venezuela. I mean, I don't really get. But I'm not trying. I don't understand the mentality behind this, because it'd be one thing to think, oh, that's an interesting idea, but they've tried it and it hasn't worked, and they still want to do it. In fact,
but you know what, Steve? The problem is we are not teaching that in our schools, and I'm convinced that's why young people are falling for this, because they don't know what socialism has done. Right.
I mean, the one of my favorite examples of this is in Chile, which went free market. In the 70s and 80s and 90s, became the richest country in South America. It went from one of the poorest to one of the richest. And the socialists and the Marxists hated that government. Even though people were getting richer, they hated it. And what they did, I don't know if you know this story, but they infiltrated the schools and the churches and the entertainment industry and all of the kind of talking professions, the media, and they kept talking about how oppressed people were, even as they were getting richer. And they finally succeeded. They overthrew the government. Now Chile's going in the wrong direction again.
I got to say, that's a really scary story, because it sounds shockingly like what's happening in our country.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what they've done. They're so good at infiltrating the cultural institutions, the universities, the schools, the media. And that's why I wanted to have you on, because I'm so glad you're telling people, we've got to warn people, this is their strategy.
Oh, yeah. And especially now when you look at this ticket of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, I mean, right? I mean, he loves Maoist China. He thinks that's the model.
Yep. And they also want to they also want to tax us to death, and they want to take everything away. Is that part of this Marxist doctrine, to take away from the rich and give it to the poor? Or?
Absolutely. Marxism is at heart a politics of envy.
Yeah. Yep. And instead of building yourself up to get ahead, you take it. It sounds like what they're saying is, instead of building yourself up and pulling, the old saying of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, instead of doing that, you just take it from people.
Well, and you pull the other person down.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're all equally misery in equal misery.
Yeah, there you go.
So what do we do to turn it around?
You vote for Donald Trump, for one thing.
Yeah, that would help. That would help. By the way, Katie Gorka has been my guest, and she is wonderful. Her book is fantastic. And Katie, thanks so much for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.